By way of introduction, I'm Claire O'Connor. I am the Director for HR and Employee Services for South East Employers. So I will be facilitating today's session. And I think a lot of you will know David as well. So, but David, for those who don't know you, could you just introduce yourself and share what you do?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's David Beeney. For those of you who don't know me, I spent most of my career in magazines and newspapers. Not as a journalist, I was on the commercial side of things, at one stage being the MD of the Evening Telegraph in Northamptonshire, and I spent many years as a commercial director for Auto Trader. But throughout those years, I had this big secret, a really big secret. And what was my secret? My secret was I was battling in private with my mental health. Even I'm surprised when I look back at my life that nobody knew about it. And I'm sad to admit that includes my ex-wife of 28 years had no idea. My friends down the pub had no idea. And certainly nobody I worked with knew about my constant battles with panic attacks and anxiety. But my whole life changed forever in 2016 when I outed myself for the first time about my mental health. It's proved to be one of the best things I've ever done in my life. When I first shared my story, it resonated with more people and at a deeper level than anything I've ever done before in my life. Even one of my best friends said to me, David, thank you for sharing today. I've suddenly realized I'm normal. But then a lot of other people came up to me and said, can I be honest with you too? And I said, yes. And they said things to me like, I would never, ever share with my employer my true mental health because I think it would impact on my career. And the more and more people I spoke to about my mental health, the more people said to me they didn't trust their employers. So I made this big decision back in 2017 that where I wanted to focus my energy was helping employers to become kinder. I wanted to help employers to create cultures in their workplaces where every single employee could be really honest about their mental health. And that decision back in 2017 has led me on a hell of a journey since then. And I feel very lucky and privileged to do the sort of work that I do. To give you a flavour of my current work, I'm working with the Royal Navy, helping them to get rid of their macho culture, to make it easier for sailors to be honest about their mental health. I'm not political, never have been, never will be, but I'm an advisor to the Labour Party on how to create a kinder culture within their own party. And I work with some amazing organisations. I've been lucky enough to work with Google, with the United Nations, with the Mercedes F1 team. And I work with many borough councils now around the UK, helping them with their workplace culture. Let me just say again, just before I let Claire ask another question, this subject about creating kinder cultures at work is not a fluffy subject. When we create a kinder culture at work, the organisation wins as well, because your best people are less likely to leave, less people go off sick, and you just drive greater energy through the whole organisation. But anyway, Claire, I think that's enough about me introducing myself. Let's get into this session.
Yeah, so thanks to everybody who submitted questions in advance of the session. As I say, if we could just ask if people wouldn't mind putting their cameras on once you've kind of all finished eating lunch or whatever, that'd be appreciated. It is nice to see everybody's face. So I'm going to sort of jump straight in and ask you, David, sort of from your experience, what are the key things that we all need to do to remain mentally resilient?
Yeah, I guess why not start today by talking about our own mental health, because I think before we look after other people, we've got to understand their own mental well-being. So let me just talk through what I think are the key things to look after our mental well-being. And I say this as a mental health therapist and also someone who runs workshops very regularly, asking people like yourselves what you do to look after your mental well-being. And let me also just say, what I'm about to say, there's nothing new here at all, but these are the key things we should be doing to look after our well-being. Firstly, sleep. Let's not underestimate the importance of sleep. I don't know about you, but when I'm tired, the world is a more difficult place to deal with. When I'm getting decent sleep, I can deal with most things that life throws at me. But getting good sleep is not just about laying in bed at the weekend. It's about trying to regulate your sleep if you can. I'll admit I'm a 10:30 sort of guy. What does that mean? It means about 10:30 every night, I think I need to get to bed, because I like to be asleep by about 11 and I get up at 6:30 most mornings. And that's the way I roll. If you're looking at me at the moment and you regularly go to bed at midnight, That's fine. Go to bed at midnight regularly and get up at roughly the same sort of time. What we have to try and avoid are those nights we stay up way, way too late. So firstly, make sure you try and regulate your sleep. Another obvious one is physical exercise. It will mean different things to each of you, but there's a definite link between exercise and how you feel about yourself. It means different things to each of you. Some of you try and do 10,000 steps a day. Some of you go to the gym. Some of you go running. Some of you just go walking in the woods. It doesn't matter what you do as long as you do something. If you're looking at me at the moment and you're not currently getting any exercise whatsoever, you've got to try and find some time in your schedule for physical exercise. Something else I want to talk to you about is me time. The most important person in the world to love is not your mum. It's not your kids. It's not your partner. It's not your dog. The most important person in the world to love is yourself. The more you love you, the better person you become to people around you. And self-care is not selfish. You've all been on airplanes. They say on every single commercial flight in the world, if the oxygen mask comes down, you put your own mask on first. Well, that applies to life every day. Every one of you should be putting your oxygen mask on first. Through my work, I get to meet so many incredibly kind, caring human beings. But many of you share with me that there's one person you're not brilliant at caring for, and it's yourself. So if you're one of those people that spends your life running around after everyone else, you've got to find more time for me time. And I find people generally in the HR community and people who get involved in the world of well-being and mental health, we're often the worst at looking after ourselves. Very closely linked in with that is balance. So many people share with me these days, they're struggling to get the balance in life right between looking after the family, their work, and carving out time for themselves. I'll be honest with you, a few years ago during the pandemic, I nearly became ill because I had no balance in my life. The 4 things that I normally do to look after myself had all been shut down to me. And all I was doing was work. To bring that to life for you, I play squash, but I couldn't play squash because the leisure centres were closed. I couldn't go and watch my beloved football team, Watford. The football grounds were closed. I couldn't go down the pub and have a few beers. The pubs were shut. I couldn't go to Bulgaria. I've got a little house because I wasn't allowed to travel. So I don't have a magic wand today to give you more balance in your life, but it is something you do need to reflect upon. And however busy you get with the family and work, you've got to carve out time for me time, because I'll say it again, self-care is not selfish. Something else that's, well, I guess speaking as a therapist today, something that's very important is that we talk about things. Most of my clients in therapy are in therapy because of something they've never talked about, sometimes for good reasons. So I want you to ask yourself today, is there something I'm holding on to that I need to talk about? Because without doubt in life, the longer we hold on to things, the heavier they get. Something else that's really important for your mental well-being is to have things to look forward to. That's one of the reasons the pandemic was so tough for our mental health, because there was nothing in the diary. Again, speaking as a therapist, when some of my clients are at a very low ebb, it's because they've got nothing in their lives to look forward to. Now, when you think about it logically, if you're having a really crap day at work, a really, really tough week, it's nice to think, at least I'm out with the girls this Friday. At least in 3 weeks' time, I've got a long weekend away with the family. At least in August, I've got the annual 2 weeks in Mallorca booked. Always have things coming up in your life, because it will give you a boost when you're struggling. Another thing that is so important to your mental well-being is to surround yourself in life with quality people, people that love and respect you, people that give you good energy, people that make you feel good about you, and minimize the time you spend with anyone that's chipping away at your self-worth and your self-confidence. Again, speaking as a therapist, I've got too many clients in therapy because they stayed in a relationship with somebody for too long. And years later, they're paying someone like me to try and recover their self-worth. And diet's important too. A healthy diet is a healthy mind. Let's not panic. I'm not saying we can't have a big Chinese takeaway on Friday night and get the Prosecco and the beers out. Of course not. But there's certainly been times in my life where I've drunk too much. I've eaten a lot of rubbish. But the moment I start eating and drinking healthier, I start to feel better about myself. And just one final thing about looking after your own mental well-being: be honest with yourself. When it comes to physical health, we think about contacting a doctor within days. When it comes to mental health, we put it off, we put it off, we put it off. I don't know where they get this stat from, but they reckon that if you woke up this morning with symptoms of depression for the first time in your life, you're likely to seek professional help in the year 2031. On average, we wait a staggering 6 years before we get professional help for our mental health, compared to literally a few days or weeks when it comes to physical health. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, David. So could you just sort of talk through what some of the early signs of burnout are?
Yeah, let me just first of all introduce people to my frog. I think I can take people off of mute. Rachel Chapman, you've made the mistake of smiling at me. Rachel, if we drop a frog, not this plastic one, into a boiling pot of water, what do they reckon happens, Rachel, to the lovely little frog?
Is it in a boiling pot of water, or are you? Yeah. So if it's a boiling pot of water, it will die. It will boil dead.
Rachel, will you promise me you won't try this at home? But apparently they live every single time. The shock of hitting the boiling water forces them into immediate action, and they manage to jump out and live every single time.
Oh, okay.
But thank you, Rachel. Now let me ask Kerry Sargent. Kerry, if in contrast, Kerry, we put a frog into a cold pot of water, but we put them on the very lowest temperature on the cooker, the very lowest temperature on the hob, what do you reckon happens, Kerry, to that lovely little frog?
Oh, I'd say it'll probably die, but it was slow and painful because it will be struggling.
Sad. Thank you, Kerry. Sadly, everybody, Kerry's correct. The frog doesn't realize they're cooking. They leave it too long to get out, and they very, very slowly boil to death. Now, this always sounds awful, but this is burnout. This is burnout. Things heat up around you in your life very, very slowly, and you don't realize you're cooking. Now, frogs are very intelligent animals. You'd like to think if they knew they were cooking, they'd get out. You're incredibly intelligent. You'd like to think if you were sitting there today and slowly cooking, you would do something about it. But do you know what? We tend to ignore the signs of burnout. The signs of burnout being low energy, not sleeping well, inability to concentrate. You suddenly stop enjoying the things you've really enjoyed doing. Now, if you're experiencing some of that, please don't worry, because life isn't easy. We all experience some of those symptoms. But if you're experiencing some of that on a sustained basis, that's when you need to ask yourself, do I get enough sleep? Do I get enough exercise? Am I doing enough for me? Have I got lots coming up in my life I'm excited about? Am I surrounded in life by people who make me feel good about myself? Is my diet conducive to good well-being? Because those are the key things to looking after your mental well-being and protecting you from burnout. Thank you, Claire. Oh, you're on mute, Claire.
Sorry about that. Is it possible to measure your own mental well-being?
Yeah, I one of the reasons I think we focus on physical health is we think we can measure it. We perceive there's ways of checking in with our physical health, but we don't think we can measure our mental health. I'm going to suggest to you today, I think we can, because nobody knows you like you. And it's a case of really being honest with yourself. I'll share a story today I don't often share. I was meeting a friend a number of years ago, and when I met him, he said to me, "Hi, David, how are you?" And I said, "Thanks for asking. I'm 52 out of 60. And he said, "What do you mean you're 52 out of 60? I said, "Don't worry about it. Let's just get some beers in." And he said, "No, I want to know why you're 52 out of 60. I said, "If you really want to know, a few years ago, I was really struggling. I was going through my divorce. My career was falling apart, and life was rubbish. And I said, I sat down one day with a blank sheet of paper and thought to myself, what are the different components of my life that make up my overall happiness? And I came up with 6 things. So what I do every now and again, I give each of those 6 things a score out of 10. That gives me a score out of 60. And on that particular day, I was 52 out of 60. And my mate said to me, he said, that sounds really interesting that you check in with your overall well-being and happiness. He said, would you mind sharing with me what you think are the 6 components of your life that make up your overall happiness? I said, okay. I said, if you really want to know, it's my main relationship in life, my family, my sense of purpose, my financial well-being, my physical health, and my mental health. So in other words, if I'm happy in my main relationship, if the kids and the parents are okay, if I've got purpose in my work, if I've got money in the bank and I'm physically okay and mentally okay, then life should be good. He said to me, as much as I like the fact that you've got a way of checking in with yourself, if when you do that, you're not honest with yourself, the whole process is a waste of time and energy. And he said, I'm going to suggest to you that you're not being honest because a score of 52 is ridiculously too high. I couldn't believe what he was saying. He then asked me if he could see my scores that add up to 52. And at first I told him to sod off because I said, this is really private. But of course, I ended up showing him my scores. And he said to me, I'm sorry, David, I'm right. You're overscoring. He said, I'll give you 2 examples. You've scored yourself 10 out of 10 for mental health. He said, I sort of get that because you're a therapist. You go around the country every day talking about mental health. But he said, you forget I know the real you. You're still racked with insecurities. You still catastrophize stuff and you still have panic attacks. You're not a 10, are you? And I said, fair enough. You're right. So I lowered that score. He then said to me, your financial well-being is far too high as well. The score you've given yourself for that, because he said, your divorce hit you hard. You used to live in a lovely 4-bedroom house. You currently live with your mum and dad in Hemel Hempstead. And so your score's not that high, is it? I said, no, you're right there as well. So I lowered that score. So the moral of this story is you meet your best mate for a beer. You walk in a pub 52 out of 60 and you're on your second pint and you're down to about 45. In all seriousness, the reason I'm sharing that with you is for 2 reasons. I think we can measure our own mental well-being. It's a case of really sitting down and being really honest with yourself about your life and what things are dragging you down and trying to own that and working out where you need to make improvements. But the other reason I shared it with you is that when you do it, you've got to be honest with yourself because my mate was right. I was kidding myself that I was 52 out of 60. I was actually quite a lot lower than that. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, David. I'm not on mute now, am I? Good.
No.
So when should you seek professional help with your mental health, and how do you get someone to seek help who flatly refuses to do so?
Couple of questions in that one. I think we all understand the scale of 1 to 10. If I said to you all today, how are you really feeling today on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is you feel amazing and 1 is you're feeling absolutely in a very, very bad place? We all know that scale where 7's okay, where 8 or 9 would be brilliant. And the lower you get from 7 could indicate you're struggling. Now, if you're being honest with yourself and regularly you're scoring 5 or under, then something's up, because life's got to be better than being 3, 4 or 5 out of 10 in most days about how you feel about yourself. And I guess that's the time you need to ask yourself, if I don't know how to get my scores up from over 6, then perhaps I need to get some help. What's encouraging me as a counsellor these days, I'm getting more and more people coming to see me in recent years saying to me, David, I hope I'm not wasting your time, but I'm not really sure why I'm here, but I just haven't been myself recently. And I thought it would be really good to talk to someone who is in a safe place. He's not going to judge me. And that's really encouraging me. And the second part of that question, Claire, was how do you get someone to go to counselling who's flatly refusing? Now, it's very difficult to force someone if they don't want to go. But one of the things that can work sometimes, a lot of particularly ladies come to me and say, I can't get my husband to open up and talk about things, but he's struggling at the moment and he won't go to see a therapist. Well, There's a really fine line between therapy and coaching and mentoring. Certainly my modality of counselling, which is called person-centred, it's very similar to coaching. And I find sometimes if you say to someone, look, I know you won't go to therapy or see a counsellor, but would you go and see a coach? If we got you a coach, would that make a difference? And I sometimes find by changing the language, it can make a difference. Not always, but it can make a difference. So sometimes changing the language, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you. So how much vulnerability would you advise that we share about ourselves in the workplace?
Yes, it's a good question. I think the reason we put this question in here, or someone asked it, is because these days I share a lot of vulnerability. And I think it's become proven in recent years that managers, leaders, HR people, whereas 10 years ago we weren't allowed to show vulnerability at work, it's now proven that when we share vulnerability, we're actually inspiring people around us to be their authentic selves. It's even evidence-based now that someone at board level in an organization is more likely to lose their job when they don't show vulnerability. But it's really important, I remember to say, some of you here listening to me right now might be immensely private people. And I'm not expecting anyone here today ever to share anything in the workplace that you're not comfortable sharing. However, I'm suggesting to all of you today, you consider sharing a bit more vulnerability than you may have done earlier in your careers for reasons I just said. Because it's okay not to be okay. You'll actually inspire people around you by being more authentic. And there's definitely been a change in leadership in the last 10 years, particularly in the UK, that allows us to be more vulnerable and authentic than we may have been 10 years ago. As to how far you share vulnerability, it's a personal decision. You only share what you're comfortable sharing. Some of you will naturally share more than others because you're quite open. Others of you are fairly, very private. So it's a personal decision, Claire, I think, as to how much you share. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you. So what are the best ways to encourage people to open up about their true mental well-being?
Again, if you've got someone who you can't get to open up about how they really are, but you're really worried about them, let's be kind to ourselves. You can't force someone to tell you how they are. But there are some things that we can do that encourage people to open up. And one of the simplest of all is to ask someone twice. So in other words, when you say to someone, how are you? And they say, yeah, I'm fine. Then look them in the eye and say, come on, how are you really? Because when you ask that second time, invariably they give you a more honest response. I was doing some work for a borough council in the north of the country, and I was meeting people on a one-to-one basis. And I decided to put this into practice. I had a template in front of me, and the first question was, how are you? And the second question was, how are you really? And I'll give you two examples from the same morning about the impact of asking people twice. The guy came in to see me and I said, hi, how are you? And he said, yeah. He said, I'm good. He said, it was my birthday at the weekend. And he sat down and I said, well, happy birthday for the weekend, but how are you really? And he went very, very quiet on me. And when he eventually spoke, he said, my brother died on my birthday last year. He said, it's actually been a really difficult few days, but thank you for asking. Now, if I hadn't have asked him twice, I'd never have known that his brother had died on his birthday last year. Another guy comes in to see me, and he's the classic big personality of the team. Big voice, big smile. He comes into the room and I said, hi, how are you? And he said, I'm great. And he sat down and I said, how are you really? And he looked at me and said, well, do you really want to know? I said, well, that's why I said, how are you really? And forgive my language, everyone, but he said, I'm shit. I'm absolutely shit if you really want to know. And he spent the next 15 minutes really opening up to me about what was going on in his life at that time. And he was in a very, very bad place. Now, if I hadn't have asked him twice, I would never have known that, because his initial response was to say he was great with a smile on his face. Now, obviously, every time you meet people, you can't ask them twice how they are. You'd quickly annoy a lot of people in your life, but it's just something that can work from time to time. And just 3 other quick ways of trying to encourage people to open up. Big part of my training as a therapist is to notice, not interpret. What most of us do with people we love and care about, we sit there for hours and hours and hours trying to work out what's going on. The danger is when you try and interpret behavior, it's very easy to make someone feel judged, but nobody likes to feel judged. But we are allowed to notice change. So, for example, if Hannah Jackson and I were good mates, and Hannah was normally pretty easygoing and smiley, but just recently had started snapping at me and biting my head off, I am allowed to say to Hannah, Hannah, I care about you. I've noticed recently you become quite irritable. Is everything okay? And because I'm not judging Hannah, but I'm simply noticing change in Hannah's behavior, she's more likely to share with me what's going on in her world at the moment to make her become irritable. Another thing we can do to check in with people is, as I said earlier, it's the old 1 to 10. Ask someone how they are on a scale from 1 to 10, because they might just come up with a number that surprises you. I got a lovely email from my mum recently who said to me, David, thank you for the 1 to 10. After your webinar, I asked my 12-year-old daughter how happy she was out of 10. And the way she responded led to the most honest and open conversation I've ever had with my daughter about her well-being, because we used the language of numbers. And the last one, again, is sharing vulnerability. People tend to mirror behavior. So if you share something about you, people are more likely to share something back. So there's a few things, Claire, that we can try and do to encourage people to open up. Thank you.
Thank you. So on mental health first aiders, have we got any on the call today, mental health first aiders or wellbeing champions? Excellent. Good stuff. So David, could you talk me through sort of the effectiveness of sort of mental health wellbeing champions in the workplace?
Absolutely. I think we all know the role can work absolutely brilliantly. It works brilliantly where it's part of a wider, more holistic program around well-being, and where the mental health first aiders or well-being champions are encouraged to meet up regularly and share, and where they're pretty high up the agenda and regularly put into quite a lot of profile within the organization. Where they don't work as well, from my own experience, is whereby the organization has almost ticked a box around well-being, and all they've really done is get some mental health first aiders trained up a few years ago. They've given them no ongoing support or development since then, and they're almost discouraged to get together. It's not seen as effective use of their time. So for those of you who haven't got mental health first aiders, they can work really well, because in the real world, you won't always want to chat to your manager or go to HR if you're struggling. And they give you an additional point of contact for someone who's not a counsellor, but they're there just to signpost the right people for you to talk to. Where they don't work well is where it feels tick box. I'm sad to use that phrase, but where the people at the very top of the organisation don't really seem to care about mental health and well-being, don't address their culture from the top down, don't train up managers on well-being, and all they do is train a few mental health first aiders up. So happy if any of you want to talk to me outside of today about how we can support your mental health first aiders, and if you like, just almost relaunch them because they may have lost their way a bit, then please do let me know. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, David. And so what are the boundaries when someone approaches you citing poor mental health?
Sorry, what are the boundaries?
Yes.
Yeah, I let me talk through a very, very simple framework that's been adopted by many organizations as a best practice response if someone comes up to you to talk to you about their mental health. And this applies whether you're in HR, whether you're a manager, or whether you're a mental health first aider. This is the framework I thoroughly recommend that we very much stick to. The reason I coach out this framework is that experience tells me too many people in HR, too many managers get too involved and put themselves under pressure to fix people. Others run a mile because they don't feel qualified to talk about mental health. And hopefully what this framework does is give you more confidence in how to respond. Now, if someone does come up to talk to you about their mental health, the chances are they've been putting off this conversation for a while, days, weeks, months, even longer, and they're dreading your reaction. They're worried you may never look at them the same again. They're worried that who else you're going to tell. They're worried that once they've told you, there's no going back and they could be labelled. So they're likely to be feeling quite uncomfortable. So I suggest however you react initially, and this is just a framework, contains 2 important words. And those important words are thank you. Thank you for talking to me. I believe that by saying thank you, it's the best way to put somebody at ease about the way you're going to react. And you're almost saying to that person, it's a privilege you're sharing this with me. Thank you. The next part of the framework is the obvious bit. It's about the listening. It's about maybe going somewhere quieter, putting your mobile phone away, closing your laptop, and just doing your best to be non-judgmental, to be empathic, and to really make sure that someone feels they're being listened to. The next part of the framework doesn't always initially sound very kind, but what I suggest you say when they finish speaking sounds something like this. Thanks again for talking to me today. I do care, but I'm not qualified to deal with this. Now, what we need to do together is to get you professional help. And at that stage, you'd encourage people to contact your EAP or to go and see their doctor or to seek private counselling. Whether you're a mental health first aider in HR or a senior leader in the organisation, your job's not to fix people. It's to create relationships where people feel they can talk to you and trust you. It's about listening, and then it's about signposting professional help. Now, you don't need to signpost professional help on every occasion, of course not. Only when appropriate, because you're already doing a great job just by listening to someone. You're already helping them. The last part of the framework is the bit when I look back at my own career, I wasn't very good at. And that's because you may not be there to fix people, but you are there to stay on the journey with them. So in other words, what you say at the very end of the conversation sounds something like this. Thanks again for talking to me today. I do care, so let's get something in the diary. And you agree when you're next going to check in with them, not to get too involved in what's going on, but to make sure they're talking to the right people. As I say, when I look back at my own career, this was the bit I wasn't good at. I think I was pretty good at creating relationships where people felt they could talk to me, pretty good at listening, pretty good at suggesting what they should do. But then I got busy and I moved on. And I thought, I've done my bit. Trust me, from experience, if one of your friends or colleagues looks you in the eye and says, I promise you I'll get some help. I promise you I'll call the EAP. I promise you I'll call my doctor. They probably won't. It's been tough enough to talk to you. The thought of escalating this to another level is often one step too far. And that's why you have to stay on the journey with them. And that journey may be 2 years. Over the next 2 years, you may meet with them every couple of months to make sure they're talking to the right people to get them to a better place. Thank you, Claire.
Thanks, David. So what can councils do to create kind cultures where all staff feel safe to be honest about their true mental health?
Claire, so I didn't get all of that. Did you say what can councils do to create the right sort of cultures?
Yes, where staff feel safe to be honest about their true mental health.
As I said to you earlier today, I've worked with many diverse organisations on trying to help them to create the right cultures. And I think the key things are as follows. The tone has to come from the very top of the organisation. Again, I see too many organisations, I'll use that phrase again, tick a box when it comes to mental health. They don't address the culture at the very top of the organisation. If it's not authentic from the top, employees will realise that. I was talking to a council, I won't name who they were, a few years ago, and I had about 60 employees in a room. And when I got to the end of my talk, someone in the room put their hand up and said, it's not so much a question for David, but it's an observation. Has anyone else noticed that there's no senior managers in the council in the room here today, but there's about 60 or 70 employees? At this point, someone quite junior in HR panicked, put their hand up and said, but they're really busy. And you can imagine how that went down at the time. It's really important that the senior people are seen to very much role model and to attend meetings and seem to support activities around mental health and well-being. So number one is the tone has to come from the top. Secondly, line managers play an absolute critical role in workplace culture, because you can work for a brilliant organization with a great culture, but if you've got a crap boss, then you don't get that experience. I bet every single one of the 41 of you here today has had a really bad line manager in your career, and you know how that feels like. They never get the best out of you. They can mess up with your head. You often end up looking to leave and move on. But hopefully you've all had a great manager too, and you know what that feels like. The most powerful insight I've heard over the years, which I'm allowed to share with you, comes from HSBC, the bank. They're considered one of the best employers in the world, but they got a big shock. They did a big staff survey of 76,000 staff on this topic, asked them loads of questions, but one question was black and white. It simply said, do we care about you, yes or no? And they put that question in because they thought most staff would say yes, because they've got this great reputation. Well, guess what? 38,000 staff said no. 50% of their workforce said, you don't care about me. Now, luckily, or fortuitously, they're brilliant with their data analytics. They dived into the data and they went looking for a common denominator. They wanted to understand why 50% of their workforce didn't feel cared for. And they found the common denominator straight away. And it won't surprise you with what I'm saying. It was your line manager. They then drilled further into the data to see, what does a manager do or not do to make people think we don't care about them? And what came out was really basic stuff. And number one was that the managers who created this impression, they didn't care about you. Whenever they started a work conversation, whether a team meeting or a one-to-one, all they ever talked about was work. They never started meetings by saying things like, I know we're busy, everyone, but how are you? How are you doing? Forget about work for a minute. How are we all? And they have to ask from here. Now, I've seen it so evidence-based myself that where we start more work conversations by not talking about work, it's one of the easiest ways to create cultures where people feel valued. Many of my clients call my work now the power of how are you, because they've recognized the importance of starting work conversations by not talking about work. So number one was about tone from the top. Number two is about educating line managers on the power of how are you. The third one again would be encouraging people to share vulnerability. I'm going to say that one again, because when people share vulnerability, they're inspiring everyone else to be authentic in that environment too. And the last one is all about language. One of the real ironies for me is I spend my life these days saying, we've got to get better at talking about mental health, with the irony being the worst thing you can say to someone at work is, I'm worried about your mental health. It's that word mental. We don't like it. It's too invasive. It's one of the best ways to close people down. So I'm going to talk again about 1 to 10. We need to say to people, things like, what's your energy levels today on a score from 1 to 10? Because when you talk 1 to 10, people are more likely to open up to you about how they're actually feeling. And generally, we need to have more conversations at work that are not about work overall. And we need to work harder to really connect with each other on a more humanistic level. A great boss of mine once said to me, David, how's Sally's dog? And I started laughing. And my boss said, what's funny about that? I said, well, hang on a minute. Why would I ask Sally about her dog if I didn't even know Sally had a dog? And my boss looked at me so disappointingly and said, David, you've worked with Sally for 2 years now, and her dog is her life. So come on, when you next see Sally, ask her about her dog. So I did do. And when I look back at my relationship with Sally, she became a real advocate of mine, a brilliant colleague. But we only connected the day I asked her about her dog, because at that point we moved to a far more human connection. And she really knew that I cared about her. And she went on to work a lot harder for me. She became a much better employee. And equally, she felt she could talk to me about things because we didn't just have a transactional relationship. So, Claire, I think they're the key things. I think many organizations overthink this. To me, it's a little more conversation. It's starting more conversations at work, particularly from the managers, by not talking about work. That alone makes a huge difference. Thank you, Claire.
Thanks, David. So just sticking with sort of senior leaders. So sort of obviously, yeah, budgets are tight in all local councils. So how can we persuade senior leaders to invest in wellbeing?
Again, Claire, I think the answer goes back to language. I think I'll exaggerate here to make my point and oversimplify it. I think there's a good chance at the moment, with budgets being very tight, that if you go to senior leadership and say we need some investment in mental health and well-being, many senior leaders would maybe think, we just can't spend that money at the moment. They would regard it as a soft, fluffy subject. If you go in and talk to them about trying to create a culture that where people flourished and we drove productivity and energy through the organization, they're more likely to link it with actually the organization performing more efficiently and more productively. So I think it's about language again. It's a difficult one to get right, because one council recently was expecting, when they asked if they could bring me in, to get a no, because they'd had no on so many things because budgets are so tight. But the CEO turned around and said, absolutely, yes. This is such an important topic. People are really struggling as we head towards devolution. We need to make this a priority. So it can work by saying we need to look at the mental well-being of our people. But generally, if you can link this, the whole area of well-being and mental health, to creating cultures where people flourish and you get the best out of your people, is often a better way to secure investment, but not always. Thank you, Claire.
Thanks, David. So could you leave us all today with one golden nugget to take away from this session?
If I and in a minute we'll open up, by the way, if anyone's got any questions. I would say I want you all to find a way to become kinder to yourself. So many of you are so hard on yourselves. What I didn't share with you earlier on, I spent until I was in my early 50s doing everything possible to avoid public speaking because of my ongoing battles with panic attacks. And I now almost deliver talks every single day, sometimes at very, very big conferences. So how do I now deliver sessions like this without becoming too anxious and becoming panicky? I think it's there's three reasons. One is because I've truly accepted it's okay not to be okay, and I'm finally comfortable being me. Secondly, I have realized that we actually inspire when we share vulnerability and we're not seen as weak. And thirdly, I've in our careers, we often talk about raising the bar. We say, right, this year I'm going to raise the bar. Well, I've lowered my bar. I haven't lowered my standards. I haven't lowered my aspirations. I think I've discovered what they call the true value of self-compassion, which is about being kinder to myself. When I look back at my life, I've been really hard on myself. I've always thought I had to be perfect every day. But by being kinder to myself and lowering the bar, I'm actually achieving more because my stress levels are down. And because I'm operating with greater clarity of thought, because I'm more relaxed, I'm achieving more. So the one thing I'd love you all to take away from today is to think to yourself, how can I become kinder to myself? Because it's not going soft on yourself. You're likely to bring down stress levels and achieve more as well. It'll mean different things to each of you. But the main thing I want you to take away from today is about you and how you can look after your well-being. Again, experience, so many people in HR are running around looking after everyone else in organizations, working so hard, but you're not always the best at looking after you. And that applies to the mental health first aiders here as well today. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you. So we're going to open it up for questions now. I've just had a question that's come through in the chat relating to what you were just saying, David, about being hard on ourselves. So what can we do to stop being so hard on ourselves?
some of this stuff I'll say is really obvious. And what I will say to all of you today, if my wife was listening to me now, she'd tell you all, David's great at preaching all this stuff about well-being. He's not always the best at doing it himself. So I do appreciate this stuff is it's pretty obvious, but we don't always do it. So the first thing that sprang to mind then is many of us, when we've got a high workload on, we don't take sufficient breaks. We don't stop for a break in the morning and mid-afternoon. We don't have a proper lunch break. But it is actually proven that when you take breaks in a day, you will achieve more than if you don't. Because if you keep yourself refreshed and energized, you become more productive than if you sit there all day just sort of, doing email after email after email and on back-to-back meetings. So you've got to get more disciplined about the hours and that you do in a day and the breaks that you take. And again, I know that's easy for me to say, sometimes very difficult in some of your environments. Get fresh air every day. If you're working from home or you're working in an office, at some stage in the day, get outside and get some fresh air. Because again, fresh air don't underestimate how much it invigorates you. The other thing again is moving. If you're working at home, many of you sit in the same chair at the same table all day long and you don't move. You even have lunch at where you're working. When you move zone, again, you're going to invigorate yourself. So get yourself a coffee and go and sit on the bed or go and sit on the sofa. Don't sit in the same chair all day, because so much around your mental resilience is linked with energy. And if you can look after your energy levels, ironically, you can do more. You can achieve more. So, Claire, what was the question again? I'm conscious I've said one thing.
So the question was, I am harder on myself more than anyone else ever is. So how do we stop being so hard on ourselves?
Oh, stop being too hard on ourselves. Again, there's no easy answer. You have to try and own this, and you've got to put yourself first. Let me say again what I said earlier. You all need me time. You all need me time. Some of you have got young children. You've got a big job. I haven't got a magic wand answer, but you've got to carve time out for you. There was a senior guy a few years ago. He approached me and said to me, David, for the first time in my life, I'm failing at something. And I said, what are you failing at? And he became quite emotional. And he said, I'm failing at being a dad. And I found out that when he first became a dad, in fairness to him, he wanted to create more time for mum and baby. So he gave up 3 things. He gave up his Arsenal season ticket. He gave up running, and he gave up going to car rallies. And we think he developed some form of postnatal depression because he'd stopped doing anything for himself. I'm meeting him next week. I think it's 5-6 years on since I first met him. He's got 3 children now. He's got a very good career. He works very hard. But these days, he always finds time for himself as well. And he makes sure that his wife also finds time for her. Because we all need me time. Self-care is not selfish. Think again about the oxygen mask on an airplane. If you are on an airplane with your children and the oxygen mask comes down, you put your own mask on first. Well, that applies to life every day. Ideally, we should all be putting our own oxygen mask on first. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, David. Has anybody got any other questions?
What I will do is I'm going to put my email address in the chat function. If any of you want to get in contact with me outside of today about anything I've spoken about in here whatsoever, please do get in contact with me. I'm also very easy to find on LinkedIn if you want to contact me in that way. But my email address is davidbeeney@breakingthesilence.co.uk. And if any of you just want to chat about how I could potentially support you, either as an individual or in your role within your councils, whatever that role is, very, very happy to find some time to have a chat with you. So please do feel free. You can get in touch outside of this forum today. Very happy to talk to you. Any more questions? I've never heard so many HR people and mental health first aiders being so quiet. Joke, humour apart, I know this subject matter, often stun my audiences into complete silence. So I'm actually not expecting really any questions, but I think we've got how do we stop it? I guess it's that question again. How do we stop ourselves being so hard on ourselves? Let me just say again, since I've lowered the bar, since I'm not putting myself, with panic attacks, for example, I spent most of my life panicking about them and really worried that in meetings at work, I'd come across anxious and nervous. About 8 years ago, I suddenly thought to myself, so what if I have a panic attack? So what if I get nervous? That's me. I can't help it. The moment I stopped fighting them and was kinder to myself, ironically, they stopped, or virtually stopped, because I was no longer anxious about my anxiety. If you can find a way to turn the heat down on yourself and take the pressure off, you get greater clarity of thought because you're more relaxed. And when you're less hard on yourselves, you're likely to achieve more. I didn't get this 20 years ago. 20 years ago, someone said to me once, David, what you need to do, you need to make a friend of your anxiety. And when they said that at the time, I thought, I've never heard anything so ridiculous in my life. 20 years later, I got it. 20 years later, when I accepted that was part of me and tried to like myself more for who I am, things got a lot easier. And I wish someone had said that to me in my 30s as opposed to or I wish I'd have got it in my 30s as opposed to finally getting it in my 50s. Any more questions? I'm not sure we're going to get any more questions.
Thank you, David, for that session. It's a really good session. And thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoyed your company for the last hour. Hope to see you all again sometime. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Bye.